Hello, YouTube. We are back for Goddess Vibrations. This is Natasha, your host, and I'm here with Sara Jacobsen to talk about spiritual practices for fertility. As you know, if you've been tuning in here, we talk about all things feminine, energy, medicine, sexuality, spirituality, pregnancy. Apparently now this is nice to branch off into the pregnancy and fertility area. And I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist who transitioned to be a mindful coach and then got a PhD in mind body medicine. And now I work as a consultant, and I show up here every week to have these really powerful conversations that can heal. And it's not just about sexuality. It is also about energy and the depth of things, because female sexuality is systemic. It is deep. And so all of those topics that go into systemic and deep issues, even social justice. So here we are. Hi there, Sara Faith. Thank you for being here. And thank you for reaching out about this topic. It's a really interesting one, I think, and be helpful for many people.
Yeah, thank you so much. I think it's interesting that you mentioned social justice because in the fertility realm, there are definitely prejudices against women of color trying to get pregnant. For example, African-American women come to fertility. They've done sociological research about this. And African-American women, when they come to a fertility clinic and they ask for support, they're not treated as seriously as white women coming to a fertility clinic receiving support. And like I said, they've done sociological research on this. So yeah, I mean, fertility is an issue that affects all women, from all different countries, all ethnicities, all different types of lifestyles. And so, yeah, I'm really excited to dive in today.
Yeah, well, I imagine that that is something, that social justice issue, that oppression, that racism is actually affecting fertility as well. I imagine, because
yes.
we start to internalize. Gina Ogden says we internalize that cultural oppression in our erotic anatomy. So
yes,
it'd be interesting to do a sociological study on that.
Yeah. Well. And also for African American women, they have a history because African American women in America, they have that history of their female ancestors being slaves and having forced gynecological surgeries and experiments on their bodies. And so for certain groups of women, they have this additional trauma that comes from the ancestors, and then we have the Tuskegee experiments with African American people. And so, yeah, there's like this added layer working with, for example, African American women and fertility support. And there's an added kind of sensitivity and awareness that I think is required that you often don't get in the mainstream fertility realm. And so one of the reasons why I do what I do is because I believe that women and couples deserve honoring, and they deserve this path to be sacred, and they deserve to be really listened to. And a lot of my clients, when they go to a fertility doctor, they're not really listened to. The doctor isn't slowing down. He or she isn't really taking them in. A lot of times these appointments are 15 minutes long, even 30 minutes long. You can't really get a good picture of what's happening with the couple, with their health history. And not only do oftentimes you have medical underlying health issues that are missed by fertility doctors. They just don't see it at all. And I have stories that I can tell you about that. But there's also something that is really important about the couple themselves that these fertility doctors are missing. They're not seeing it. And so what's required if you're working with a couple who are struggling with infertility is really slowing down, connecting with them as a couple, and looking at the whole picture. Yes, looking at, asking them about some of their physical health imbalances, but also looking as them as a couple and thinking about the child as well. I mean, if they're going to be bringing life into this planet, that's something that's really important and really sacred. I mean, this is the next generation we're talking about. And this is the next generation of leaders and thinkers, and the next generation that's going to eventually, be our leaders and our change makers. And so the way that we conceive our children, the way that we are treated in pregnancy, the way that we give birth, all of this matters. All of this matters. And it almost like creates a cascade effect. So for a lot of women, if they feel disempowered in the fertility process and the conception process, then they're oftentimes going to feel disempowered in the pregnancy, disempowered in the birth, disempowered in the early postpartum time. And so it has a ripple effect. It has a cascade effect. Just like when a woman is in labor and, you give her Pitocin and then those speed up the contractions. And then, maybe the baby's heart rate goes up because of the Pitocin, and then it's an emergency, and then she needs an emergency C-section. So there's that cascade that you can see in labor that started with the Pitocin. And I see that cascade as well, oftentimes with women who are conceiving their children in a way that is not the most sacred or empowered. And so, it has an effect, like how you conceive. Because I think a lot of people are like, well, who cares? Who cares if I just do IVF or IUI or whatever? Like, why does it matter? But it does matter. It creates that ripple effect. And also, too, this is the time that we're calling in souls. From my personal experience in my life,
I wanted to ask you about that because we just dove right in and I never got to introduce you. So I was going to ask you, how did you get into this work and who are you? And
yes.
And what is it that you do? Yeah.
Yes. So my name is Sara Faith Jacobsen, and I was diagnosed with polycystic ovarian syndrome, which is a gynecological disease, in 2014. And then prior to that, I had been a birth and postpartum doula. I had done prenatal and postpartum massage therapist, lactation educator, and then finally lactation consultant. So I was in the mother baby realm for about 6 years before I was diagnosed, when I was 29 years old. And I really started down this path of doing mother baby work because from the time I was 7, I knew this was my life purpose, was to support mothers and babies. I just knew that. I had that clarity when I was young. And so after I graduated from Mills College, I graduated in women's studies, and I wrote my senior thesis on menstruation and alternative menstrual products, and also about the health issues with conventional tampons and pads. So I wrote that for my senior thesis for my bachelor's. And then after that, I became a birth doula and postpartum doula and all of that. And then I was diagnosed at age 29 with polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I was diagnosed through a transvaginal ultrasound, which is where it goes inside the vagina. And then they have a part that's on the stomach, and then also through blood work. And what was found is I had high testosterone and I had cysts on my ovaries. And so at the time I was single, I was 29, and yes, I did want kids at some point, but I didn't have a romantic partner at that time. But I knew that I wanted to heal my PCOS, to heal it. And so I went down a 6-month journey I first took herbal medicine for a short period of time. And then I really focused on healing with the goddess Oshun. And the goddess Oshun is a fertility goddess from Nigeria. She's a beautiful goddess. She's goddess of love and fertility and abundance, and she's beautiful. She's the river goddess. So and at that time I lived in the Sierra Nevadas in California, right by the Yuba River, which is a really beautiful sacred river up there. And so I was doing spiritual work with the goddess Oshun. I was going to the river and cleansing my womb with her waters and praying to her and doing these very traditional practices with the goddess Oshun that I had learned from my spiritual teacher at the time, who was initiated and a teacher in that tradition. And so, so for 6 months, I really devoted myself to my work with the goddess Oshun, cleansing my womb, praying to the goddess Oshun, asking her to not only heal me of my PCOS, but release trauma that was stored in my womb space. I have childhood sexual history, or sexual abuse in my past, in my childhood. So there was some of that trauma and that sadness in my womb. And so I'm working with the goddess Oshun and cleansing my womb, and I'm asking her to release the pain from my womb and heal me of PCOS. And so about 6 months into this solo journey with the goddess Oshun, I do my blood work again. And lo and behold, my testosterone is now normal. And then the year later, about 5 months later, I redid the transvaginal ultrasound and the cysts mysteriously were gone. And so after co-creating healing with the goddess Oshun, I just got clear that this is a realm that requires attention and devotion and sacredness. And I just got clear that there was something really missing in this fertility and conception realm. And so that's when I honed in on conception and fertility and kind of let go of the birth doula and the lactation consultant work.
Well, it's really interesting because as I'm listening to you, I'm hearing you saying that you really just open yourself to this feminine energy even more so. And I know people that are listening, they might think, maybe not our crowd that we attract, but some people might find this video and be like, well, how can you lower testosterone in your body through going into a river, you know, that sort of thing. But I think I've said on the show before that for me, when I got my divorce, I was seeing a natural, like a chiropractor who was a naturopath, and she was doing muscle testing, and she said your testosterone is very high, like it's higher than I've seen in most of my female patients. And I was trying to get through a PhD. I was going to court. I was just doing a lot. So my testosterone kind of raised, I guess, because I'm doing all of this stuff, right? So while you had you dropped into your feminine to lower your testosterone, because I was having to be kind of the mother and the father now for my kids, my testosterone went up. And, you know, my libido went up, my sex drive went up, but also then I started getting acne after a while, my breasts got smaller, things like that. And when I noticed that if I dated a partner who was a very masculine man and more so chivalrous and really interested in taking care of me, my breasts got bigger, my skin cleared up, because the estrogen and testosterone would start to balance. So for people that think this is just wild woo stuff, there's a lot to this, you know, the emotions and the ways that we follow our natural rhythms, our natural earth rhythms. And I love that your thesis project was on menstruation. That's really cool.
Yeah, I wrote my senior thesis on, I wrote it on the history of menstrual products. So like the first menstrual cup that was ever invented, like the first patent. But then I also wrote it about the health effects of conventional tampons and pads. But yeah, getting back to what you were talking about, testosterone. Yeah. And I think that there are several things that I heard you say, like you having to be the mother and the father, you having to be divine feminine and divine masculine is a lot for a woman to hold. And I think so many women feel like they have to do that. They have to be in their masculine energy to get things done, to be productive, or they're in a difficult situation with their past romantic partner or the father of their children or whatever. So yeah, it's challenging. The other elements as well is when your cortisol, which is the stress hormone, goes up, it actually converts to excess testosterone. And so there's that like stress layer. But then also on like another level as well, if we think about it, all of our hormones start in our brain, start with the hypothalamus and the pituitary gland. And so, and our brains are so amazing. And there's emotions are here, and trauma and experiences, and like the way that we think about things. And so, yeah, like all of these things are so connected, even if we just think about how they're connected in our brains. My part of my story as well is that the first 6 weeks I was diagnosed with PCOS. I did take herbs for PCOS. I stopped because I was like, you know, I love herbal medicine, but it just wasn't my path. So I'm sure that those herbs I took in the very beginning had a positive effect on my health and my PCOS. And I do feel, based on my work, that it really was the goddess Oshun and myself co-creating that healing. And I think that herbal medicine allies are amazing. And when I work with clients, I usually do say, hey, let's try this herb, or let's try that herb, or go to your herbalist, or go to your naturopath. So I love herbal medicine. I think they can be really powerful allies. And also they can hold feminine energy as well. Like I believe that herbs can have like dominant feminine energy or dominant masculine energy as well.
Yeah, I had a show guest last year, a Tome Soul, and he was talking about that with THC. And he said that THC, is a feminine plant, and then it's hybridized to become even more feminine. So they're only using the feminine parts. And he noticed with a lot of growers in the industry, as they were predominantly male, and they would stop kind of pursuing women because they were engaging with the feminine with this plant. It's so interesting, because as a marriage and family therapist, we understand that we triangulate when things aren't going well in the relationship. We turn to a third party, which can be a substance, it can be job, it can be another person or an affair. And in a healthy dynamic, a therapist or a coach or a doula, somebody that's helping them out. And so this is what I'm talking about when I say energy too. And when I was doing the promo for the show, it's like looking at the energetic dynamics. And I know our conversation that we had when you reached out was talking about the energetic dynamics in the couple. I got pregnant accidentally twice. My only 2 pregnancies have been accidental, and I have 2 children. But the second one was about not even, I want to say 3 weeks after I stopped breastfeeding my first, maybe 4. And so we just immediately got pregnant with a condom both times with the kids.
Wow.
But it was after a trip to San Francisco. It was like our first trip away after becoming parents. And we were not so stressed. My mom flew out for the first time, was taking care of my daughter. And then even before she has a chance to leave, boom, pregnant again. We were like, no. But just because we were so overwhelmed, with my daughter, but it was a blessing. It was perfect timing now when I look back. But I haven't struggled with fertility, but I know that several clients that have, and it can be very expensive. It can be, the treatments can be very damaging, can even be cancer causing at times because of the high hormonal doses that they're giving you. And then often if you're doing that in your later years too, there can be a higher risk of cancer. I just today found out I had oral surgery. I've been having oral surgery since December. I have this issue in my jaw, and I just found out today from the biopsy that it was a benign tumor, but it was an autoimmune response in my jaw and the tissue there in my wisdom tooth from a surgery I had when I was 15. So all these years, my body has been building up a tumor as a defense to this trauma, a physical trauma that happened in my jaw. And so when you're talking about sexual abuse, of course, our tissues feel that. It's an emotional trauma. It doesn't matter if it's a physical trauma or emotional trauma. Of course, our body's going to respond, to that invasion. And so there's so many different things that can happen in the body. And I thought about it today, like, gosh, I'm so grateful. Like, he could have told me it was cancer, and I had cancer throughout my body, but I've been doing this really good mind body practice the last 20 years, and maybe that kept it benign. I don't know. We don't know. But this energy stuff is really, really powerful. So I think it would serve couples to try this first before going down that very expensive and heart-wrenching journey of IVF and all of those things.
Yeah. There's there's 2 main places my brain goes after what you just said, holding it in the tissues and then the IVF. So to speak to the holding it in the tissues. Yeah, absolutely. If there's a emotional trauma or a physical trauma or an infection, that's what our body does. It creates a capsule to protect itself. That's what cysts are, for example, ovarian cysts. And so, so for me with my ovarian cysts, I definitely feel a big part of it was the childhood sexual trauma that I had experienced. But also I had received the Gardasil vaccine, the HPV vaccine. And it for at least me, it came through in a energetic healing that was a part of it as well. And actually Gardasil is that's a whole nother tangent, but Gardasil is such a dangerous.
Yeah, I know that research as well. And I've
Yeah.
mentioned it in a show almost 2 years ago, that in fact, there had just been a study that came out, you might be familiar with it, 2 years ago in Europe, that showed the generation that was highly vaccinated with Gardasil actually shows higher rates of cervical cancer than previous generations. So not only was it harmful to so many girls and women and men, I know men that have severe gut issues for getting it. It also just didn't work.
And also I think I saw a study too that said that the incident of getting HPV was actually higher for people who got Gardasil. And so for me, like I said, my ovarian cyst and my PCOS, there was some of that as well. And I did have HPV at one point. My body cleared it through kind of energetic and spiritual healing.
If you talk to the OBGYNs, they say everybody has it. Anybody that's had more, I mean, seriously, they say anybody that's had more than one partner in their life has HPV, because there's 40 different strains and there's only 4 that are cancer causing. And so if it's one of those strains, that's kind of benign, they don't even tell you that you have it. They just tell you.
So they only test for a couple different strains.
Well, I think they can test for all of them, but they only tell you if you have one of the 4, because otherwise they're worrying you needlessly. And even if you have one of the 4 that can cause or lead to cancer, like you said, your body naturally will clear it within 2 years anyway.
Well, that's what my body did, thankfully. And I also did spiritual energetic healing work. So I mean, healing the tissues, absolutely. If there's sexual trauma, I mean, even when a woman is with a man and he enters her before she's fully ready, even that can create an energetic trauma and an energetic remembrance in her tissues. Abortions can create energetic trauma in the tissues as well, in the vagina, in the cervical tissue. I've worked with women who've had prior abortions, and we've definitely energetically cleared that. And past IVF experiences can create trauma. I've worked with women who had trauma from IVF 16 years ago stored in their ovaries still. So I had to support them in clearing that.
And I want the viewers to know too, since we're talking about trauma, like obviously some types of trauma, my oral surgery, an abortion, whatever else, it almost couldn't be avoided, right? It's just that sometimes you need to have that procedure done, or that thing happens. It's not always something like, oh, you were victimized or you chose to hurt yourself, or you're at fault. I don't want people to feel like they're at fault and they did something horrible, but it's like sometimes something is done to us that we can't control, and sometimes we had to do something and that had consequences that resulted in trauma. Cancer would be a great one too. So many people have to go through cancer treatment and they come out traumatized from the whole process.
So it's kind of a cause effect. If you choose to have an abortion, there could potentially be an effect to that. And of course we can clear it and do emotional and spiritual healing work, which I do. But I see it as kind of a cause and effect dynamic, So that was kind of one place my brain went. And then the other place my brain went was, you were talking about IVF, and I'm not against IVF, but what I do encourage women to do is, if they are struggling with infertility, let's have a conversation why. A lot of times the fertility doctors, they don't even get into the why. They do some very basic testing, usually hormone testing, and looking at the ovarian reserves. And then they'll be like, okay, well, these are where your hormones are at, and this is where your ovarian reserve is. And so I would do IUI, or I would do IVF, or I would do this, or I would do that. It's like, okay, well, why is her ovarian reserve so low? Why isn't his sperm quality, where it should be? Why is his morphology or motility in his sperm not where it should be? So there's not a whole lot of curiosity in that with a lot of fertility doctors. And so with my clients, I like to say, hey, let's get curious. I wonder why. Can we ask your body? Can we do a little bit of digging here? Because when you just kind of do IVF and you don't really understand why you're struggling to get pregnant as a couple, if there's an underlying health issue, it doesn't get resolved, number one. And number two, oftentimes it doesn't work for a couple who are struggling to get pregnant. They just try to do IVF and they try to ignore anything else that's going on. it may not work. And the success rates of IVF really, especially as a woman gets older, unfortunately, aren't that great. I mean, I've known clients who've, one of my prior clients, they tried IUI twice and they failed. And then finally she got it a proper diagnosis, and now they have their babies and all of that. But there's so many times that IUI fails or IVF fails. And how many times have we heard women say, oh, this is my second IVF round. This is my third IVF round. This is my fourth IVF round. And so, yeah, like with women and couples that I work with, I really encourage them to like, let's get curious here. Why not ask your body what's going on, both like physical imbalance wise, but also emotional, spiritual, energetic. While I myself am not a medical doctor, I'm not a nurse practitioner, I'm not a naturopathic doctor, all of that. I believe that the body is knowledgeable, and I believe that there's ways that we can ask their body. They can ask their own body what's going on. And in my 15 years of being an independent health researcher, I've compiled a big long list of imbalances, physical imbalances that tend to happen in bodies that are struggling to get pregnant. And so I guide them through this process. I'm like, hey, why don't you ask your body, because you're the expert on your body. I mean, with me and my PCOS, I knew intuitively before I was diagnosed. And every kind of health issue or imbalance I've had, I've always known. I've just known. And that's a possibility for people to just kind of know what's going on with their body on an intuitive level. And so I take them through practices to really connect with their bodies, connect with their intuition, and they can ask their own body what's going on. And then they can go to their medical doctor, get a proper diagnosis. So I don't do any diagnoses at all. But yeah, it's really about coming back into the body and saying, okay, body, I trust you. I trust that you know what's going on. Let's figure this out. Because if there is some type of underlying physical imbalance, let's figure it out and let's resolve it, just for your overall health. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of one of my biggest challenges with IVF is they don't often kind of get to the root of what's really going on with the couple.
Mm-hmm. Well, it almost seems like to get to that energetic root, you can't be a doctor, because you'd be having to practice within that scope that you were trained,
Right.
and that doesn't really allow. I mean, but there are wonderful doctors out there that are like, go try it. Tell me what you found. I'm open, as long as, I just know what I know and I'm giving it to you. Some of them have an ego about it, but, what you're talking about sounds a lot like body code and emotion code, and that process of shifting energy and asking the body. I work with a coach who does body code energy sessions on me frequently. And I'm always amazed at the trapped emotions that she's releasing from different parts of my body. I'm like, whoa, and it's such minor things sometimes that we don't even remember, or we just didn't think was that big of a deal. And then then there's the big traumas too. But, there's so much that the body just hangs on to, because we're vibrational beings, and the energy just gets stuck, in certain areas, and we try to throw drugs at it. It's like we would need a ginormous amount of drugs to like overpower the body, and when really it could have been just a subtle readjustment.
Right. And sometimes the process is really nonlinear. Like I had clients a couple years ago where they couldn't quite figure out why they weren't getting pregnant. Her ovarian reserve was a little low. Her hormones were normal. His semen analysis was pretty good, pretty average. They still weren't getting pregnant. And their doctors in the San Francisco Bay Area swore up and down, because she thought maybe she had endometriosis. So she would ask them and they were like, no, you don't have endometriosis. No way. Like, they're like, no, your estrogen is normal. No, you don't have it. But she kind of was like, it kind of was like this thing in the back of her brain, And I would even do like work, because I don't do this anymore, but I used to do a fertility manipulation. It's not really a massage, but it's like a manual manipulation. It's called Mercier. I used to do it. I don't do it anymore with clients, but I would do that on her. And I just remember it was always tight. And I was kind of like, are you sure? You sure you don't have endo? And she was like, the doctors say I don't. And I'm like, okay. But with them, it was really like on an intuitive and emotional level, it was about them learning to trust their intuition again. Because with this whole fertility process, they had learned to not trust themselves, learned to not trust their bodies. They were completely disempowered. And so with them, a big part of our work together was bringing them back into their power, back into their sovereignty, back to trusting their intuition, trusting themselves. And then something that they had been kind of like feeling they wanted to do for a while, but hadn't had really the guts to do it, was to move to Oregon, to leave the Bay Area and move to Oregon. So they moved to Oregon. And they were able to find a fertility doctor in Oregon who was actually able to give them the proper diagnoses. She did have endo. They did laparoscopy. She had endo stage 3. When he did the laparoscopy, it was both diagnoses. It's both therapeutic. It should be both therapeutic and a diagnosis. So he diagnosed it, and he also was able to surgically fix her in the operating room. And then they're able to be successful with IVF finally and have their babies. So, but sometimes what ends up happening is it's not always a linear process. Like in that process, it's totally non-linear. It was supporting them and taking back their power, trusting their intuition, trusting the messages that they were getting from spirit, making that move that they felt guided to do, and finally finding the right fertility doctor for them. So yeah, with some of my clients, it's like, hey, let's take back your power. Let's learn to trust yourself. Let's learn to communicate with your body again and tune into your body, and trusting that that will somehow, maybe in a non-linear way, maybe in a linear way, but somehow that will guide us in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm big on that too. And, like you were saying with the social justice conversation and the fertility, the lack of support and help for women of color, melanated women, for this fertility resource, I think experiences like that, as well as like you were saying, the Tuskegee, how am I saying it? Tuskegee? No. Did I say it?
Experiment. Yeah, I think so.
Um, that has led to a healthy skepticism of mainstream medicine, right?
Yeah.
And my early start was in social work in Phoenix, Arizona, and I was working with a lot of immigrant families from all over the world, and tended to be people of color that I worked with, and I speak Spanish, so that was part of the factor too. But I learned through my clients their kind of worldview on this stuff, and that opened me up to looking at something other than the mainstream medical model, right? And then having my own journey with depression, also childhood sexual abuse, all that trauma, and healing that, and realizing that the pills weren't going to heal that. If at best case scenario, it would be a Band-Aid. And I, at 22, didn't want to have to wear a Band-Aid the rest of my life. So I figured I got to figure this out. And I didn't have the resources to figure it out, but I had the intention and the desire and the will, and it just, one thing led to another. I went to a party and somebody told me about this book, and I read that book, and then that book led to this book, and then there were a free seminar at the library, and I went to that, and then somebody had this book, and I just went on this wild goose hunt of healing, and it really was a spiritual process. It was a spiritual journey of being open to and believing that there was a solution, right? And similar to you, our own personal struggles inform our work and get us really focused and specialized in that certain type of healing. And I thought, gosh, well, I got to go get some credentials in this, because nobody's going to want me to, nobody's going to think like I can help them heal their mental health without being a mental health professional. Now we got coaches all over. It's more, it's different. But 20 years ago, had I had the opportunity to do some of these coaching programs, I might not be $500,000 in debt right now. but I am also grateful for all of the learning and education. But I never left my, I've always had this holistic look at things, and it's partly because of the book Women's Bodies, Women's Wisdom. That was one of the books that was on my little breadcrumb trail back in 2001. And what an amazing Bible, really, for women's health issues, and even things as simple as like getting a yeast infection can sometimes be our partner lying to us or not being truthful or cheating. You know, it's our body's way of like, nope, rejecting that penis, like it's not coming in here. And
Yeah.
of course, other STIs can be similar. And yeah, I mean, that's not an STI, obviously, but I'm just saying that, yeah, infections in that area.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really, really fascinating what our body does. So I'm wondering, with your clients, has it mainly been an issue with both the couple? Has it mainly been like endometriosis or PCOS with the woman? Has it been low testosterone with the guys? Because there's a planetary epidemic right now of pesticides and plastics that are killing testosterone.
Yes, yep, absolutely. It's been a mix. It's been a mix of all different things. I've had clients, I certainly have had endo clients. I've had women contact me who had PCOS. I've had, yeah, I've had all different types of things. You're right, it is an epidemic with low testosterone in men. I mean, as you probably know, the male frogs are being turned from male frogs to female frogs because of all of the plastics and the endocrine disruptors. Yeah. So yeah, it is a big issue. Yeah, I've worked with all different types. And just to kind of like get back to your story, because I really loved it. And I feel like it was such a great example of leaving space for magic and leaving space for the magic of intuition and the magic of God. And I think that in a fertility journey, there's space for that. I like to leave room for that. Leave room for the magic of our intuition, leave room for the magic of God. And it doesn't have to be a linear process. But yeah, I mean, to answer your question, I've worked with clients of all different types. I had one woman who contacted me who they were very young, they were like 25, and they came from a strict Mormon background, and they weren't getting pregnant because they had shame around their sexuality. And so, you know, excuse me, for couples like that, it's about, you know, working with your sexuality and getting to the root of the shame around your sexuality and becoming more comfortable in your bodies and in the feminine body for the woman and the masculine body for the man. So yeah, I mean, when it comes to fertility, I think that's why I like it so much, is there's so many like different reasons why, you know, a couple could be getting pregnant. I mean, I had one where it's like the woman, the would-be baby daddy's mother, so the potential paternal grandmother, didn't approve of these two people having a baby together. So there was like this energetic, you know, thing that was coming at them. So yeah, I mean, I've just had like all different types of women and couples come to me. So I think that's a part of it that's really fun. I feel like I can be Sherlock Holmes a little bit and like put on my little detective hat and be like, okay, what is this? Is it energetic? Is it spiritual? Is it emotional? Is it physical? And I'm actually starting a group program where I take women and couples through a step-by-step process to help them get clear on why they're struggling to get pregnant or stay pregnant. And it covers the physical health imbalances or the physical wellness imbalances in the body, the emotional, spiritual, energetic, mental, all the different areas. Because I do feel like for a lot of couples, there are multiple things going on. It's like my couple who had endometriosis, the woman had endometriosis, like, yes, there was that there. And she also needed to take her power back and learn to trust her body, you know, and there was some womb cleansing there. You know what I mean? So a lot of times it's like it's layered. It's not just the physical health or not just the spiritual or the energetic or the mental. It's usually a combination of all things that are required to really get clear and get in alignment and to get ready to conceive that baby.
Well, I think you know, those energetic things with the family can go both ways too. I know in my own history, I started getting like baby cravings, like baby fever around 23. And I wasn't prepared to have a baby yet at that point. I was just, you know, had my bachelor's and struggling just to kind of survive out in the world financially. And my mom was like, no, it's too soon. Here's a puppy. You know, she got me a puppy. But when I looked back at my family, every woman in my lineage had had a baby by 23. So I kind of felt like, we feel that cycle, we feel that energy is kind of passed down. And then several women in my family, including even my stepmother, who is not a genetic relative, had kind of oopsie babies in their 40s. And so I've been dealing with some baby fever again, and I'm just like, this is very interesting. And also I was 30 when I had my first, and she's 14, and my son is 11. And like I said, we were a little unprepared. So we scrambled to hurry up and learn how to be parents. And it was a pretty intense time. I was still getting licensed as a therapist. I was doing my hours and I was working full time. So it was just, I felt like I was still in school, and it was just a lot. It was a lot. And I had a doula. I didn't know what a doula was back then, but I have a friend gifted me a doula, and it was really lovely. I feel like that whole process was learning how to, learning so much more about the feminine, and just my own body. And I couldn't believe that I'd never been taught that. And had I never become a mother, I never would have been taught all of that stuff about my own body and that deep appreciation and love for my body. And so I think when I see like some, these gnarly comments online and stuff about women, and women acting like men, or just really relying on their masculine energy, I'm like, gosh, that could have been me had I never gotten pregnant and worked with these childbirth educators or these doulas. So I have compassion, for women that kind of show up that way and don't really, they were never invited, I would say, into learning more, because it's not our dominant narrative in our culture. But it's, so our culture, I guess what I'm getting to is, our culture really has a lot to do with whether we want to bring a life into this world, and probably the ease and flow of that. And even with my son, people would say, oh, your babies are so cute, you have to have another. And I would say, no, maybe in 10 years, because I got my hands full and with two. And now, of course, he's 11. So it just so happens to intersect with my, 40s baby fever. So how much of that was me self-hypnotizing myself too, and being like, oh, maybe in 10 years, and oh, it's 10 years. So our intentions are powerful. But like you did when you went to be with Oshun, you didn't just sit around and journal in a book, I want to be pregnant, or I want to heal my PCOS, or whatever. You might have also done that, but what I hear you saying is you embodied the energy. It was a deeply embodied practice. And that's what works. Words are powerful. And there's this whole other piece that is more powerful, which is shifting the energy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always tell women, if you want to become a mom, be the energy of mom. Be that energy of nurturing, feminine power, mother energy. I mean, there's lots of beautiful mother goddesses from every different country, every different continent on this planet, from Nigeria, we have the goddess Yemoja, which is who I was formerly initiated into, which is a mother goddess. But I mean, you find mother goddesses in various Native American traditions. You find it in, Quechua and Peru and Aztec and Mayan and all over the world, and European countries as well. And so, for a woman, or Mother Mary, if I'm working with a client who's Catholic, so it's like, let's be in that energy. Let's be in that energy of mother. And it's interesting because I feel like some women are saying they want to be a mom, but then it's like they don't want to be that energy, like they're really resistant to it. And if I have a woman like that, I'm like, oh, that's interesting, like let's talk about that, like what does that mean to you, and then we might dig a little bit deeper, and she's like, oh, I had trauma with my mother, and so there's that resistance there to really embody the mother energy. And I'm like, okay. So I have a past client that I'm thinking of who was like saying she wanted to be a mom, but she's resistant to holding that energy in her body and to being that energy. And she had trauma with her own mother that we worked through energetically, spiritually, all of that. But I agree with you, like being the energy of what you want. So in this case, we're talking about motherhood, but I mean, we could talk about be the energy of an entrepreneur, or be the energy of, whatever, like, a wife, if you want to get married, but in this situation, it's like, be the energy of mom. And same thing with dad. And put yourself in situations that allow yourself to be the energy of a mother. So maybe get a little kitten or get a puppy, or maybe like, babysit a newborn baby that, like maybe your best friend just had a newborn baby, like really embrace that. And even when you're walking down the street, when you see pregnant women or you see a new mom with her newborn baby, embrace that, celebrate that. Don't feel like, oh my God, I don't have that, or oh, I'm mad that she has that and I don't, or oh, I'm triggered and I'm going to start crying. Embrace it, celebrate it, and even like soak that in, soak in that juicy energy of like a new mom. And newborn babies are so yummy, like soak it in, and just like allow yourself to be that expression in the world. And that can be really powerful.
Soak it in, but don't touch them.
Ask permission. Yes.
I remember that.
Ask permission.
Being pregnant, I had so many hands on my belly. I'm like, people, like, I do not know you, but they're just so drawn in, right, by the energy of it. Everybody's just like, oh, and I did really appreciate the way that I was treated by men while I was pregnant too. I had a lot of more considerate, and if I wasn't treated with consideration, I would had that mother bear energy too, which I almost cursed somebody out who just stole my parking spot. So I was like 8 months pregnant, and I'm like, no. Now we have those designated parking spots for expectant mothers, so that's nice.
Yeah,
the family places. But yeah, what you're saying, it reminds me of Regina Thomas Howard. Mama Gina says, if we feel envious or jealous of another woman, it's just because we're on our way there.
I love that. Yeah,
she's embodying something that we're about to experience. So it's just our little alarm system that's important to us, and we're almost there.
Yeah. I love that. That's a beautiful reframe. I appreciate that. Because I think having compassion with ourselves, if I were to, for example, if I were struggling to get pregnant and I'm walking down the street and I see a woman that's pregnant, or I see a woman with newborn baby or whatever, having compassion for myself, if I'm feeling anger, or if I'm feeling self-judgment, or maybe judging her, or maybe feeling shame or whatever, like I agree, having like that first step of like self-compassion, self-love, and recognizing it's like, oh, okay, like I'm feeling judgment towards her, or I'm feeling judgment towards myself, or I'm feeling shame right now, or anger, or whatever, I think is really important as well. And I also love what you're saying. It's like, it's almost like it's a spotlight on what we really do want. It's a spotlight, and oh, I really do want that thing. I really do want to become a mom, or I really do want to, whatever, become an entrepreneur, or whatever it is. So yeah, I love that reframe from Mama Gina.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it allows us to kind of, like you said, receive it, embrace it, accept it.
Yeah,
because it's women, we kind of run as a unit. That's just in our nature. It's kind of in the feminine nature. So the more that you lift up another woman, you're also being lifted up.
Yes, yes.
Move in community. So that's important to, I think, remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I'm looking at the time. Is there anything that you'd like to promote? I know you mentioned you have a group coming up. When does that start?
Yeah, so that's going to be at the end of March. People can just send me a DM on Instagram. I'm Sara Faith Jacobsen, Sara Faith, like have faith in me, and then Jacobsen. So they just want to send me a DM on Instagram, or they can actually text me. I have my phone number on my Instagram bio. But yeah, I would love for people to join my program. It's for women and couples. So like women who are solo, who are trying to get pregnant, but also women who are in a couple relationship. And it really looks at all the different aspects of fertility, the physical imbalances, the emotional, spiritual, energetic, mental. And I think it's going to be an awesome course.
Okay, so it's a course. How long is it?
It's going to be 12 modules, and it's going to be drip content. So they can start signing up towards the end of this month, and then they'll get one new module for the next 3 months. So
okay, so they don't have to be like present anywhere. They receive it.
They receive it. They receive all the modules. Yeah. And then I do of course I do live Zooms with it, or live Zoom calls with it and all of that. So
as the adjunct.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay. So that's for people who maybe have struggled in the medical arena before, or they're just starting their journey, I would think it'd be good for anyone, like even before you even tried being
Yes.
pregnant, just as like a, you know, to prepare your body. I used to work with a functional
Yes.
medicine doctor, and he talk about like both men and women should spend at least 6 months like detoxing and cleansing
Yep.
heavy metals and all of that
Yep.
stuff from their body.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So women 6 months and men 3 months.
Mhm.
The reason is because of the sperm cycle and the egg cycle. So for women, it takes them 6 months to grow a brand new egg. For men, their sperm cycle is shorter. It's 3 months.
Mm.
So yeah, minimum kind of 3 months for men, 6 months for women. And yeah, I do have certain supplements that I love that I tell my people about, that they can do as a 6 month or 3 month prep. But yeah, I totally agree. Like if you can give yourself that time and space, it's awesome to do a prep like that.
I feel like it's the best gift you can give your baby, especially if you're looking at, you know, like probiotics and the microbiome, because that enhances or determines really their mental health and their
Yeah.
immunity for the rest of their
Hmm.
life. So
Yes,
you can do six
absolutely.
months or 3 months. It's a big deal. It's a big deal for the future generation. We got to be forward
Yes.
thinking, right?
Yes.
Sustainable, and
Yes.
counteract some of these pesticides and not be a statistic with that. We don't want to be like the frogs. I mean, nothing
Yes.
against swapping genders if that's what you want to do, but you shouldn't be forced to do that because of a chemical in our environment, a pollutant.
Yes. We want the next generation to be healthy, happy, grounded, and ready to take on the challenges of this planet. I mean, really, a big reason why I do what I do is I know how challenging it can be to be on this planet. And so I want the next generation to have really the best leg up as possible, to not only be the healthiest, but also have parents who are in more alignment and they're whole and they're together and they're able to be like supportive parents.
Mhm.
So
100%. All right. Well, thank you for coming on. It was a really lovely talk. And I hope that people will find you on Instagram, and there'll be some new little babies coming this next year.
yay.
New little bundles of joy.
Thank you so
All
much,
right.
Natasha.
Welcome. Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, everybody who's watching this or watching the recording. And I will see